Om Purnasya Vahanam Kutra Sarvadharasya Chasanam Swachasya Padyamargyam Cha Shuddhasya Chamanam Kutaha Nirmalasya Kuthasnanam Vastram Vishwodarasya Cha Niralambasya Povitam Pushpam Nirvasanasya Cha Nirlepasya Kutho Gandho Ramyasya Bharanam Kutaha Nityatriptasya Naivedyam Tambulam Cha Kutho Vibho Pradakshinaahyanantasya Hyadvayasya Kuto Natihi Vedavakyairavediasya Kuthastotram Vidhiyate Swayam Prakashamanasya Kuto Nirajanam Vibho Antarbahishcha Purnasya Kathamudvasanam Bhavet Evameva Parapuja Sarvavasthasu Sarvada Eka tu deveshe vidheya brahmavettamai.
Good morning and welcome to our celebration of Sri Shankaracharya's birthday. Welcome to those joining us via Zoom as well, and a happy Mother's Day to all mothers out there. As we know, Shankaracharya was very loyal to his mother, made sure he came back to be with her in her final days. According to most scholars, Shankara lived from 688 to 720 CE, or give or take a few years around that time. Born into a home of a pious Brahmin family in the beautiful and fertile deep south of India, today's state of Kerala. And I've been to Kaladi, where he was born, and what a beautiful place it is on the nice river flowing past there. And Ramakrishna Math has a beautiful ashrama there beside the river. Really, really beautiful place. In that brief life of 32 years, Shankara unleashed a philosophical and spiritual power that still reverberates today. And it's a spiritual power I first encountered 1,160 years or so later in 1980, here in Sydney on the other side of the world. And I was thinking it's a part of the world, a land that Shankara never knew existed. They say you can't put an old head on young shoulders, but Shankaracharya turned that maxim on its head. He was a child prodigy, gaining mastery of religious and secular knowledge while still in his teens. And he combined that knowledge with great spiritual depth and maturity. Hearing of child prodigies, and I think it's good to reflect on this. We're all familiar with the idea that he was a child prodigy. So I thought, let's look at what happens with many child prodigies. That's not always necessarily a blessing. and hearing of child prodigies, we obviously, our immediate reaction is we dreamed that we had such great abilities. And of course, seeing exceptional abilities in such young beings charms and fascinates all around them. And the word spreads quickly. They get some degree of fame. They become a celebrated focus of attention. On the flip side, being a prodigy also leads to critical scrutiny and jealousy and manipulation and exploitation. After those bursts of genius, many child prodigies reach an early peak in their talents, and then they're somewhat peaked to find others catching up to them after some time. And they then struggle to adapt as adoration for their talent fades away. And so when you read about them, with many of them, there's this painful discovery. They find out that to maintain that eminence they have, they're going to have to work hard and be innovative if they want to continue to shine. Some tire of all the pressure and expectations, and they turn their backs on their talents. There's one fellow, he was a brilliant mathematician when he was young. This is in America. And last report is he's working in a McDonald's restaurant. Some are socially awkward and eccentric, and sadly, their exceptional talents only lead to more complicated lives than the average run of humanity. And just to finish off on this, reflecting on prodigies, when I was in primary school, I remember one day we had a new student appear, and he had this amazing ability. He may have been only about 10 years old, but he could faultlessly spell the longest words. And so the poor fellow at lunchtime, he found himself, because word went around about this talent he had, so word went around at lunchtimes, he was surrounded by the other students, and they're all yelling out these words for him to spell. The longer and more complicated the words, the better. So actually, after a few days, we found he'd disappeared. And the rumor was that he'd been put in a school for gifted children so he could get some peace. But in the case of Shankaracharya, his genius didn't faze him. It drew attention to him, but he didn't buckle under the expectations and challenges. Rather, he eagerly used them, and he used them to seek out leading philosophers of the time and engage them in debates. And he was the archetypal idealistic youngster. And he had a lot to work on because India in the 8th century was passing through a difficult phase. Buddhism, we had the rise of Buddhism in India. It had at that time been in India for about 1,000 years, or from the time of Buddha, of course. And sadly, it was heading into degenerated paths. And the traditional Vedic religion had been overshadowed by Buddhism. Buddhism, in effect, being a Reformation movement of Hinduism. And so what was there? The Vedic religion had split into numerous sectarian groups, and they were propounding a hodgepodge of practices ranging from the overly emotional to the driest intellectualism, with a motley collective of bizarre notions and practices in between. So there was quite a bit of reforming needed, and Shankaracharya very well knew that. Now, here's another aspect of Shankaracharya that I think is worthy of great mention, that to achieve his reforming mission, he set out from his home and he went to all the important places in India at that time, in all 4 directions, meeting and debating with these philosophers. Now, just think about that. Back in those times, he must have traveled mostly on foot, and he would have trudged through endless fields. There would have been vast forests, deep, dense jungles, and he must have encountered all manner of wildlife and all manner of humanity as well. India stretches over 3,000 kilometers from south to north and just under 3,000 kilometers from east to west. And so they're telling us he traveled through a large part of India at that time. So, and remembering he only lived to 32 years of age. So my goodness, what a lot of traveling he did and what a lot of effort was involved with that. Again, having arrived at these various important places, somewhat footsore and weary, he didn't just flop around. He was on a mission. And I imagine, we would have to imagine that gradually word had spread about this intriguing, youthful genius. And word must have traveled about how he was challenging and defeating these great minds in debates. So there must have been quite a scene later, especially later in his mission, when he arrived in these places. You would think a lot of interest. And then what about these people that he was debating? You imagine this imperious scholar sitting before this very bright-faced youth. And we know he had a quick wit and devastatingly intelligent. And on top of that, must have been a self-realized soul. So what a quite a blazing sort of presence he must have been. Maybe at the start of these debates, the scholar would have a wry smile and be wryly smiling at this young upstart, only to be annoyed by how sharp, how deep, how equal to the challenge he was. And so, of course, this respect grew for him. But then when you read about it, with all that boldness and brilliance, Shankara wasn't arrogant. He didn't seek to belittle his opponents. Rather, he was just trying to highlight any inconsistencies in their philosophical outlook. He was a reformer, not a destroyer. So he was unlike what you might normally have in a youthful reformer. They can be confronting and agitating, but he was calm and he was methodical. And he was very careful not to discard anything of value in the numerous systems of thought prevalent in India at that time. And although he's mainly viewed as a maybe somewhat stern upholder of the Advaitic approach, he did have a broad outlook. And when you think about it, he himself was also a great karma yogi. After all, what was he doing? What an active life he had. And then he was very devotional too. We know he composed so many hymns. So happily, he was well-rounded. There was all sides to him. Only his patience was tested by this endless reasoning and text torturing and superstitions and endless speculations of the philosophers. So he wanted to clear all of that out and have things more focused. And also he would have been impatient with philosophers who hadn't dived deep into meditation and hadn't tried to experience at least something of these things they were expounding on. Now, I just want to go into some personal reflections on my contact with Vedanta and Shankaracharya. As I mentioned earlier, I first encountered Shankaracharya's life and teachings in 1980, and that was in an upstairs room at our Vedanta bookshop that we had at that time in a historic terrace building in the rocks. And I remember it was just a small group of us, full of curiosity and a sense of adventure, sitting before our teacher, who was Yvonne Malik, who was giving a weekly class on Shankara's Viveka Chudamani. Now, Yvonne Malik was the founder and editor of a national monthly spiritual magazine called Cosmos. And she'd made a deep study of Eastern philosophy, and she played a very valuable role in bridging the gap between the ancient East and the modern West. So for many of us, she gave a really good introduction to this whole new world. And I also did a course with Yvonne on Swami Vivekananda's commentary on Raja Yoga. And so all of this, along with learning about meditation and yoga, was having a big impact on me. It's opening up whole new worlds. And I was reflecting on this, that all through my schooling back then, I don't know about now, I hope it's improved now, but you never heard the words Bhagavad Gita or Upanishads or Vedanta, certainly Shankara, never even heard about meditation. We used to have weekly scripture classes, but the whole Eastern philosophical world did not exist. You did not hear a thing about it. In fact, my first contact with Hinduism was when I went to Bali in 1979. And if you've been there, you will know it's a culture that is just, I mean, it's an unusual form of Hinduism, having been cut off from India for centuries. But nevertheless, it's a culture just saturated with the epics, the Ramayana and the Mahabharata, all of their art, their dance, everything. It is full of it. And I got a wonderful introduction to all of that when I went there. So my worldview was radically changing. I was practicing meditation and yoga. I started dabbling with vegetarianism. And I soon, though, became painfully aware, this being back in late 70s, early 1980, that all these things I was dabbling in was really incomprehensible to many of my friends and family, and really the majority of mainstream society. And it reminds me of I used to read a lot of science fiction stories. Well, I still like science fiction stories. And I remember this one story I read set in a quiet North American university town. And the children of the university lecturers would often play in a quiet park nearby. One day, the children found some toys that had been left there. And they're unlike any toys they'd ever seen. They're beautiful cube-shaped objects. When they started handling the toys, they were stunned to see the interior lighting up. And then they soon realized these toys were educational tools. Of course, they were fascinated by this, and they started to absorb then and there lessons emanating from the toys. They took them home. There was nobody else around. There was no clue who may have left them there. The parents were intrigued by the toys, but they were unaware of this peculiar capacity. The lessons only manifested when the children were alone. As the story goes, it turns out that the toys had accidentally appeared in the park, the result of a time machine experiment gone wrong by a scientist in humanity's distant future. The children were tapping into ideas, technology, and a way of being beyond the imagination of their parents. Soon the parents noticed that the children were using strange terminology and talking about strange concepts. And for the parents, this was, of course, a concerning situation. Indeed, the children had entered an advanced world, and poignantly, they felt increasingly out of tune with the world surrounding them. And I'm saying I would relate to this story because that's how I felt back when I started delving into all these things. My head was full of ideas. I was practicing things that was alien to a lot of the society around me. And then to make it worse, I was very inspired by what I was doing. So I was excitedly sharing it all with my family and friends. And then, of course, what happened was unavoidably, their reaction was very dismissive, scornful, suspicious, even fearful. And there was a bit of resentment too, which I still come across, that I'm somehow betraying my Christian Western heritage. I'm a traitor. And then again too, wasn't I gullible? Wasn't this all superstitious, primitive, backward? Now, to be maybe a bit fair to that, one of the reasons that I was getting that reaction was that back in those times, the 60s and 70s, we did have a procession of what the media maybe unkindly, but not so inaccurately described as these this procession of giggling, gimmicky, flower-waving swamis. They did, I'm sorry to say, they did create quite a bad impression. And so anybody who was delving into Hinduism, well, people didn't think too highly of that. So there was a reason. But I soon realized I had to just shut up about it. And it was more, maybe I just try and be sincerely practice it and let them see the change. And that'll speak louder than any enthusiastic ramblings from me. Then again, if they were interested and I wanted to explain what it was all about, well, let's just step back here. We are very familiar with all of this philosophy, but it does sound like it's coming from some advanced civilization or some alien civilization. So look at what's happening. What are we trying to do? What is Shankara telling us to do? Our ultimate goal is to permanently remove ourselves from all sense of individuality and merge into the infinite, where we're to turn our backs on sensory enjoyments, where to view the world as an illusory play. Even heaven is just a temporary reward for an exemplary life. But heaven is actually a place of stagnation, according to Vedanta. You're there for a short time, and then you've got to come back here and continue your arduous evolutionary journey. And that's going to extend through many lives. And then all the gods and goddesses. So thinking about that, this is a lot for an average person of Western background to accept and digest. There's a lot of material there that's quite threatening and just unacceptable in their minds. And it's also the case even with Indian community. I found it interesting when Pravrajika Sridharaprana used to give her monthly classes on the Vivekachudamani in Newcastle. It was hosted by a whole group of families there. And they would invite their friends, mainly Indian friends, to come along for the classes. And they came up against a lot of resistance. These friends were afraid to come because they thought, oh, this is just teachings for sadhus. And they were concerned that the classes were going to pick and poke at their life in the world. Of course, once they did come and then started coming again and again, they found that in Mataji's classes, in amongst necessarily an explanation of very deep philosophy, there was a lot of practical, strengthening life lessons there, giving them courage to face life here and now. Of course, we know that we are to take as much as we can from these teachings. And this is a long process. And it is interesting, isn't it, when we read about this sense of losing individuality and ending up being merged in some ultimate reality. Well, it's very interesting to read the reports of these people who have had near-death experiences. And what they've found from many of them, they were approaching a light, and they were feeling this tremendous peace. And such was the peace, many of them were, it was only with reluctance that they came back. That's quite interesting, isn't it? That's the way I would explain it to mainstream society. What about that? What do you think of that? That going away from all this, the only thing we really know, it's not going to be so threatening when it comes to that stage. And of course, as we know, the meditation and yoga and vegetarianism and an underlying consciousness, the concept of an underlying consciousness, all these ideas are becoming more and more mainstream now. So I would like to think those who are taking up meditation and yoga, Westerners now, it's not such a big jump. And just to conclude, going back to the science fiction story, it was all about the children accidentally coming into contact with a very advanced civilization of the future. But what's happening when we delve into Eastern philosophy, we are coming into contact with a very advanced civilization way in the past. And actually, that is not just the ancient past. What they found, what they discovered, that's not just the ancient past, that is actually the future. We are actually getting a peek into the future of humanity, the way the trend is going. We are tapping into that more and more. And so we are getting a glimpse of what the future is from the ancient past. Now, I'll call on Sridharaprana to give her talk.
Shruti Smriti Purananam Alayam Karunalayam Namami Bhagavad Padam Shankaram Loka Shankaram. I salute the divine feet of the great Shankara, the repository of Shrutis, Smritis, and Puranas, and the abode of immense compassion, whoever accomplishes the good of the world. Happy Mother's Day. Ya Devi Sarva Bhuteshu Matru Rupena Samsthita. Namastasyai, 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 Namo Namah. Salutations to all the mothers. In general, in particularly to the mothers, in general to everyone, because according, I feel, motherhood may be feminine, but motherliness is a principle. Wherever we see unselfishness, care, love, there the mother principle is active. So as such, every being, Sarva Bhuteshu, it didn't say Sarva Matreshu. The Rishi said Sarva Bhuteshu, in all beings. So gender doesn't come into it. So as such, my salutations to the motherliness and motherhood and the mothers. Yes, just a little bit in a traditional way, I'll quickly go through the life of Shankara, because we are taking a dip into this river called truth, knowledge, and bliss. Swamiji said in his sannyasini, where flows the bliss and knowledge, truth and knowledge and bliss that follows. Sing high that note, sannyas and gold, say Om Tat Sat. So Satchidananda river, we take a dip. He was born in Kerala, parents Shivaguru and Aryamba. Salutations to the great parents who brought up such a great soul to this world. And very early he lost his father, and mother doted on him, and she saw that the boy gets all the education in time. So within 5 years of his age, he had, like how we kindergarten, all the kindergartens of highly intellectual world he had already finished. And he got his Upanayana, and then the Vedic education started. And then this education made him to think. And the socio-cultural background of the condition of that particular time made him to think. Where is equality found? The answer was in sannyas. So then he determined that he will take this path, but only child. So naturally, the mother was reluctant, and he was very fond of his mother. And he said, I am not neglecting you, mother. I'm going for higher purpose. Whenever you think of me, I will be back there and do whatever is needed. I'll see that everything is done for you. I promise you I'll come. So he left the home. And usually, people think that monks and nuns are very hard-hearted. Whenever I used to travel in India by train, I would make friends with people and have a lot of discussions and talking. Once I was alone in the train and a young man was there. So we became friends and we were talking. In the course of conversation, many times he was saying, I love my parents. I love my parents. I said, what do you mean by that? Everyone loves, even the animals, birds love, as long as they are not independent, they do rely and they love the parents. So what do you mean by that? Then suddenly it struck me, oh, you mean to say that because I have become a nun, I don't like my parents, and so I become a nun? No, I tell you, no one can become a nun and monk by hating or disregarding parents. Parents are the living divinities. And if you can't love the living divinities, the one which you see, how can you love some reality which you don't see? So none of them are coming out of the family in the negative way. If they have left the house, they have got deep love for the parents and they want to do something really enduring for them. That's why they go. So this is the idea. So Shankara was like that. You see, even in the ordinary cases, if a monk or nun realizes 7 generations above and 7 generations below, we benefited. If such is the case with ordinary monks and nuns, what about Shankara? So he was really doing a great thing to the family where he was born in and to his ancestors. So at last, finally, he got the permission from his mother. Then he left and he came to Madhya Pradesh near Narmada, where he met his guru, Govindapada, who was the disciple of Gaudapada. So the Ashcharya Vakta, Kushalosa Labdha, Ashcharya Gnata, Kushalanushishta, both wonderful teacher and wonderful student. And the culmination of it was momentous. That is re-establishing the Advaita Vedanta. That was the effect of this coming into. Then he stayed with the teacher for 4 years and learned everything thoroughly. And then the teacher asked him to go to Varanasi, which was the center of learning. And from there to propagate this Vedanta, there he went and he started writing the commentaries on the Prasthanatrayas, the 3 major works of Hinduism. That is the Upanishads, the Brahma Sutra, and Bhagavad Gita. And it is Sri Shankara, it goes to Shankara's credit to bring out the Bhagavad Gita from the forest of Mahabharata and make it an independent text. Before that, I think this, Houston Smith, he says, it's amazing, if Buddha had studied Bhagavad Gita, that Buddhism wouldn't have been there today. If Buddha had studied Bhagavad Gita, Buddhism wouldn't have been there. Maybe they even had some other plan. That's why he didn't have the patience to go through all the Mahabharatas with all those jealousies and fightings and all that. So if he had gone through, Buddhism wouldn't have been. he would have been one more incarnation, the same Vedanta. He was catering for the whole world. Maybe that's why the divine did not allow him to read the Bhagavad Gita. But it was genius of Shankara to bring out the Bhagavad Gita from the forest of Mahabharata and to make it an independent text for people like us. So we are really, really, eternally grateful to Shankara. And then he got beautiful disciples he could come across. They came to him and they were blessed. And many were the disciples. Four among them were Padmapada. Then, so I'll tell you, it's a beautiful, he was from Chola Rajya, from Tamil Nadu. He came and he became the disciple of Shankara. He was so devoted to Shankara, I believe. He could understand what's the need of him. And naturally, if someone loves you, you will be more affectionate to him. So there was a jealous. The disciple, why is the master so much fond of him? And then he said, I'll show you, wait. One day he called him, I believe he was in the other bank of the river. He just called him, Sanandana, come on. It was Sanandana, something his name he called. And he didn't see where he's going, he just started walking. And the faith in the Guru, the love of his Guru, sustained him by, I believe, the lotus bloom at every step where he kept. And that's why Shankara gave him the name Padmapada. This is the name, you deserve this. Where under his feet, the lotus blooms. So this is the greatness of him. Then there is another disciple who was dumb, dull, eccentric, good for nothing. Parents are wondering from the childhood, this boy is like this, what am I to do? What are we to do? Then they heard some yogi has come. So they went to him, sir, can you do something for this boy? This has been like this. Then the boy, Shankara looked at him and they said, my boy, who are you? Where have you come from? Where are you going? Then out came the Vedanta from his mouth. And the indestructible, immutable, Atman, all-pervading, I come from nowhere, I go nowhere, all this. Shankara was surprised. He said, the knowledge of Brahman is just like a fruit in the palm. So he said, give me this boy. Good for nothing, doesn't matter, I need him. He'll be all good for me. So he took the boy under his care and he became Hastamalaka. Hastamalaka means a fruit in the palm. So the knowledge of Brahman was like that. So tangible, so obvious it was for him. Then there was another disciple who was not very intelligent, but very loving, very caring, looking after the master, doing his needs, all the menial jobs, washing, cleaning, cooking, all these sorts of things, whom we say. So he was busy with that. And it was time for Shankara to take classes for the disciples. And they were asking, Master, why don't we start with it? And he said, just wait, Giri has gone, he will come back. Oh, Giri. What's the point of taking class for Giri and his wall? It's one and the same, as dull as that wall, in their attitude. So Shankara was pained at the way they were thinking of him. So wait, I'll show what it is. Then he said, he blessed him mentally, may you be illumined. Then came Giri chanting in a beautiful meter called Totaka Chanda, the meter called Totaka. In that he started praising the Guru and Guru's power. And he humbly came prostrated, and the other disciples were surprised. So much of knowledge and wisdom and poem coming, lyrics coming through his mouth. How could it be? They understood it was the grace of the master. Then Shankara said, henceforward, you will be famous as Totakacharya. Because you wrote extempore poem, you sang in this meter, you are Totaka. So with all these disciples, he came to Prayag, where there was a great opponent called as Kaumarila Bhatta, who was a follower of ritualistic Vedanta, Vedas. So he had an encounter, but he was in his last stage of his death. He said, no, you better go to my disciple who is there in the central India. So he came to Mahishmati And he asked people he wanted to find out where Mandan Mishra's house is. So he asked some ladies, they were taking the water and going. They went, can you mothers tell where Mandan Mishra's house is? Oh, you just go that side, you can see a parrot talking in the cage. Oh, the ritualistic worship has to be followed till all your life. Yagna is the ritualism is the ultimate aim of Vedanta. All these things, the parrots will be speaking. Whichever house you see a parrot speaking, that is Mandana Mishra. So just imagine that house used to have so much of discussions on Vedas and Vedanta that even parrots had learned. Parrots have the habit of quickly learning things. If they keep on hearing, they will say Radha Krishna, Radha Krishna. If they hear, they will start taking. So anyway, so he came there and then he met, of course, and then he had an argument with him for 18 days. And finally, he proved that Advaita Vedanta, supremacy of Advaita Vedanta, and Sureshwara had to accept this. And like how Robert was telling, see the beautiful, Shankara was not arrogant. He didn't criticize any belief. See, he defeated Mandana Mishra, followed, and Mandana Mishra that's the greatness of great people. He was convinced that ritualistic worship is the one which will ultimately lead to the what do you call that, whatever the ideal might be. That was his attitude, and he believed sincerely into that. That sincerity is what that counts. Sri Ramakrishna says, go take any path and go. If you are sincere, you will come. Sooner or later, you will come to that goal. So what is important is the sincerity of the person. He was sincere. And then he says, look, defeat is never in my life. This is the first time I have been defeated by you. But my mind is not feeling bad about it. But I'm thinking, how could Jaimani, the author of the ritualistic Vedas, how could he mislead us? See, the pain, that all these days I thought something wrong as real. So this pain he expresses. And he says, no, Jaimani is not wrong. See, Shankara is an Advaitist, but he's telling there is no wrong in Jaimani. Why? Jaimani knows you cannot jump from first step to the highest step. There's a gradation, it's gradual. For that, these things are given. You go through that, you understand the futility of the rituals. Then what happens? Then you completely give up. If not, what? Maybe if I had done that, it would have been nice. Maybe if I had done that, would have. So you will not invest your full energy or power into what you want. You retain something, some reserve is left. So, but you need total commitment. That will come only when you know the futility of things. Then you completely invest all your energies into the ideal which you are approaching. So that is why Jaimani has made. There's nothing wrong in it. So he didn't criticize them. That's the greatness of Shankara. He knows the worth of everything and he knows the limitation of everything. Take it, go onward, forward. Charayaveti, Charayaveti. This is what the Upanishad says. And then, of course, he became, and then later on, he established the 4 mutts in the cardinal centers of India. That is one in north, Badri. There he established, he kept in the east Padmapada, in the west Hastamalaka, in the north Totaka, and Sureshwara in the south, all the 4. And in Kashmir, he went to Kashmir, and he ascended the seat of omniscience there, Sarvagna Pita. And then from there, he walked all alone to Kedar. That is how the great people give up their body. But within 32 years, he finished everything. In between, he had to come all the way back to south. He came to do the final rituals for his mother. And the mother remembered, he felt an urge to see her. Then he came, and then he did what was needed for the old lady, and then back again he came. And finally, at the age of 32, he left, walked alone to Kedar, and there what they do is the Mahaprasthana, that's the road going towards. They just keep walking up, walking and walking. In the high altitudes, their oxygen is very less, and to sheer exhaustion, the body drops. Because they don't have that I-ness and minus for the body, they just drop it very casually. They drop it. That's a, there is no samadhi or anything. Because Shankaracharya went through that place, that is why they have got that samadhi still in 2013, you know, in the floods it had gone. Now our Honorable Prime Minister has done a beautiful statue, and they have re-established. It's a wonderful place. Would like to go and see them. Anyway, now coming back to the teachings of Shankara, our Atmapanam, our Ajayapana Mataji was very fond of this stotra. So basing on that, quickly I'll finish this teachings of Shankara. This is called as Atma Panchakam. I'll sing it. Naham deho nindriyanyantarangam nahankara pranavargo na buddhihi darapatya kshetra vittadi dura sakshi nitya pratyagatma shivoham rajvagnanad bhati rajjuryathahi Swatma jnanadatmano jiva bhavah apto kyahi bhranti nashe sarajju jivo naham deshikoktya shivoham abhatidam vishwamatmanya satyam satyajnanananda rupe vimohat Nidra mohat swapnavat tanna satyam Shuddha purno nitya eka shivoham Matto nanyat kinchidatrasti vishvam Satyam bahyam vastu mayopakliptam Adarsantara bhasamanasya tulyam Maya dvaite bhati tasmat shivoham Naham jato janma mrityu kuto me Naham prana kshutpipase kuto me Naham chittam shokamohau kuto me Naham karta bandha mokshau kuto me Jivo naham deshikoktya shivoham Sakshi nitya pratyagatma shivoham Shuddha purno nitya ekas shivoham Sakshi nitya pratyagatma shivoham. The first stanza says, I am neither the body, the senses, the mind, the ego, the vital airs, nor the intellect. I am beyond all ideas of wife, son, land, and wealth. I am the witness, the eternal, the internal self. I am Shiva himself. The greatest lie which we tell to ourselves is that we are bodies. This is the bane of our life. The Vedanta tells, no, you are something greater than you are far greater than what you think of yourself. You are not the body, nor the senses. You are Shiva, the blessed, the pure, Shuddha, Buddha, Mukta, pure, ever free, ever intellect, the very source of joy. In the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, there's a beautiful statement. It says, I'll translate it in English. I won't go into Sanskrit too much in Sanskrit. Don't want. If a man knows the self as I am this, that is, if he knows truly, yathartha, that he is the Atman, the Purusha. Then desiring what? For whose sake will he suffer in the wake of the body? So if I know that I am the Atman, why do I want to go through all the sufferings? Wife, children, family, all this. There's a very funny saying in Kannada, Hagalkanda Bavili yaar bidtare. If you see a well in the daytime, you will never go and fall at night in it. Those days, in the gardens, they used to have for irrigation, the wells will not have any compound or anything. Quickly, they can put it for irrigation. So we have seen, we call garden farm wells. Many people fall and die. That's a big disadvantage about it. What happens, the saying is, if you have known that in this particular way, if you go, there is a well, if you're sure of it, you have seen it in the daytime, you will never take the risk of going and falling it at night. So even if you have got an intellectual understanding that I am something far better than what I look like, I'm something more greater than what the senses tell me, the buddhi tells me, why should I commit to a wife and children? This is only for those who have not yet committed, for them it is. So I am the pure. Then this second verse Ajapana Mataji has used in her meditations. A rope through ignorance appears to be a snake. Even so, through ignorance of the self is the individualized selfhood of the Atman. When told by a person in whom one has faith, the illusion disappears and one sees the rope. Even so, I realize through the words of the Guru that I am not the individualized soul, but Shiva himself am I. The Shankara is trying to make us understand, you think of this constantly. Constant contemplation, manana is necessary. First listen to it, then contemplate, think about the pros and cons of it. And when you have understood the clear intellectual conviction you get, hold on to that conviction and dive deep into the meditation. That is nididhyasana. Shravana, manana, nididhyasana. This has to be done. Very funny story. When I was thinking about it, I remembered in our Madras Mutt, we have got a beautiful ashrama. It was a garden house like. The old owners had a lot of, must be very artistic persons, statues and fountains and all were there. And there were a few statues of lion. So our Mataji had put the lion in the place where a lot of cotton trees and all were, the plants were there. It's very picturesque, very beautiful. One day a young mother came with her toddler boy, must be 2.5 or 3 years old boy. The mother was talking and the child was playing around, going around in the garden, and suddenly a big scream. We thought some snake must have bitten. We all ran. And then crying, what? Lion, lion, lion. The boy started running to mother and screaming the top of the, there's a lion there, there's a lion there. Then the mother went and she said, my boy, this is not lion, this is statue. This is, see, look, I put my hand. You see, the child has the faith in the mother. So he got convinced that this is not really lion, this is a statue. But still that palpitation is there, that fear is there. The boy is saying, he's crying, bitterly still crying. This is a statue, this is not a lion, this is a statue. And the Mataji called us, we are all inside. Mataji called, look, this is how every moment the body will drag you down. Every moment the mind will drag you down. Every moment the ego will say, I am an individual. What? You say this to me? This will come. Like this child, you need to tell again and again, that I am not this, I am not this. This is not a lion, this is not a lion, this is a statue. So this is called as manana. So in that incident, Mataji called us and told us. So it was really, it was so beautiful. I just remembered that when I read this. So when told by a person in whom we have faith, a child has faith in the mother. So we need to have faith in the Guru's words and take it up seriously and do it. Then In the self that is truth, knowledge and bliss, this world shines falsely owing to ignorance. It is not true. Even as dreams under the benumbing influence of the sleep, the pure, infinite, eternal, the one Shiva himself I am. We will never know. As long as we are sleeping, we are not aware that we are dreaming. A child may be sleeping on the lap of the mother and dreaming some fearful dream and crying. What does the mother do? Wakes up. My child, get up. Get up. What's happening? Get up. And the child wakes up. Hold on to the mother. Holds on to the mother. See, unless we wake up to the reality, we will never know. Either the world or our own body and mind is impermanent. So waking up to the reality is the utmost important. It might start with hearing. It might start with a conviction, intellectual conviction. Then as we keep up going on doing our spiritual practices, the buddhi becomes light and light and light, transparent. One fine day, the light of the self reflects, and there we get the glimpses of our true nature. Even a bit of this knowledge, Swalpamapyasya dharmasya trayate mahato bhaya. Shri Krishna has told in even a bit of this knowledge will save us from great fear. That is the greatness of this knowledge of the Atman. Matto nanyat kinchidastatri. Besides me, there's nothing here. The outer world is really a product of Maya and shines in me that I am the one without the second, even as an image shines in a mirror. Therefore, I am Shiva himself. Even the scientists nowadays, are, as Robert said, we are heading towards that. So this person, I just can't pronounce their name. Or how do you pronounce D-U-E-R-R? D-U-E-R-R. Duer? Thank you. Hans-Peter Duer, president of the Max Planck Institute in Munich, who succeeded Albert Einstein and Werner Heisenberg, makes a funny statement. He says, I studied matter for last 35 years, only to find out that it does not exist. I have been studying something that does not exist. Exactly what Adi Shankaracharya said long back from the Upanishads. So the vast, omnipotent energy is the universal consciousness called God. And we humans are but a tiny bit of that consciousness, the individual consciousness. That is because tiny bit of consciousness is because we are not ready still to accept our vastness. You know, our limitations obstructs in our acceptance. Because if you think you are immortal, then you should be something which is not subject to deterioration. And only compounds deteriorate. One singular thing will never. So, as the scientist Ranganathan Maharaj always used to say, consciousness is always experienced in singular. Consciousness is singular, whose plural is unknown. So, if you are singular, then you are infinite. What stops you from thinking that you are not infinite? Just the habit. We have got so much used to think of ourselves as limited beings. We are not ready to accept the truth. So that's why I said it's a bane. And finally, he says, I am not the body. I am not born. How can there be birth and death to me? This also Ajayapana Mataji has said that. I am not born. How can there be birth and death to me? I am not prana. How can I hunger and thirst? I am not the mind. So whence can there be misery and delusion to me? I am not the doer. So whence can there be bondage and freedom to me? So one infinite existence is am I. That is what Shankaracharya and all the great teachers of the world have tried all their best to make us to drive this one idea that we are infinite, pure, immortal existence, consciousness, bliss, absolute. Thank you.
Just a few announcements. We have the yoga class on Thursday from 10 to 11:15 a.m. We have the fortnightly spiritual discussion coming up this Friday night, led by Prodigy. Next Sunday, we don't have a talk here in Vedanta Hall. We're having a one-day retreat at Dharma. It's something we haven't talked about much in the last few years. We've got a retreat center in Robertson in the Southern Highlands. We're currently doing some renovating, making some improvements there. So we are going to start highlighting it later this year, I hope, once a lot of this work is done. But anyway, we are having, there's a Bhagavad Gita class that Prodigy conducts once a month by Microsoft Teams, and that group was very interested in visiting Dharma and having a retreat there. So we're having a retreat specially for them, but you're also welcome to join. So that'll be next Sunday from 9:30 a.m. to 4 p.m. You'll need to just talk to me afterwards if you're interested in coming. It's about a 2-hour drive away. Also, looking further ahead, as you see on the big posters we've got up, we've got a very special event on Sunday, the 5th of June, delving into all aspects of the twilight years of our lives. And that will be via Zoom only. So there's an email address there. You do need to register for that, and the sooner you do, the better, with the help of our planning. And we have donation plate there, donation box up the back. And for those who are here, we've got some sweets and savories that have been up that we will share now. So thanks for joining us today. And thanks to those of you joining in via Zoom. And the talks, this has all been recorded, will be put up on our YouTube channel within the next day or so.